In the third year of my secret relationship with Sebastian, he suddenly announced his wedding news. The bride wasn't me. Some people who knew the situation felt indignant for me. Sebastian sneered coldly, "If you feel sorry for her, why don't you marry this impoverished wretch instead?" Later, my grandfather was seriously ill and the company was in crisis. I was forced to announce my pregnancy and inherit the family business. "Miss Genesis, is the child Mr. Sebastian's?" I faced the reporters and smiled gracefully. "The child has nothing to do with Mr. Sebastian." I heard that on that day, Sebastian was so angry when he saw me with a slightly bulging belly on TV that he smashed all the furnishings in the room. Later, someone photographed the most low-key and mysterious figure in the Beijing circle, coaxing a woman in a low voice on a busy street, "Genesis, the child is almost 1 year old and will soon be able to call Daddy. Aren't you going to give me a proper status?" When I pushed open the door of the private room, Sebastian was on one knee, proposing with a huge diamond ring, only the person he was proposing to wasn't me. In front of him was a young girl in a white dress, very beautiful and elegant. She was so touched that tears were streaming down her face, nodding and crying as she said, "I do." When I entered, Sebastian didn't even look up, focusing on putting the ring on the girl's finger. It was only when the girl went to wash her face and touch up her makeup accompanied by her best friend that Sebastian looked at me indifferently. "Xiaowei is innocent and timid. It took me a lot of effort to court her. It's better not to let Xiaowei know about that little affair between you and me before. Also, she has already accepted my proposal. I'm going to announce the wedding news tomorrow." I had been in a secret relationship with Sebastian for 3 years. Apart from the elders of our two families, only a few people in the circle knew the inside story. As soon as he said that, the few people in the private room who knew the situation all looked up at me. I took a deep breath. "Sebastian, could you please not announce the wedding news for the time being? Even if it's postponed for a month, no, half a month." Sebastian let out a laugh with a faint trace of sarcasm in his eyes. "Genesis, at this point, are you still clinging on desperately?" "Sebastian, for the sake of our past relationship, enough." Sebastian suddenly threw the wine glass in front of him with a cold face. "For 3 years, the Sebastian family has at least filled a deficit of 300 million yuan for the Genesis family. Isn't that enough?" I was left speechless. "Go back. Lest Xiaowei comes back later and misunderstands when she sees you." I turned around stiffly. When I opened the door to go out, I heard Sebastian say to someone, "If you feel sorry for her, why don't you marry this impoverished wretch instead?" I couldn't help but laugh at myself. The Genesis family was indeed in decline. Especially after my parents passed away, the company was almost on the verge of falling apart. But Sebastian also forgot that it was our impoverished Genesis family that saved the lives of his grandfather and him many years ago. However, he only resented that the Genesis family forced him with the favor they had done. He resented me, who in his eyes was forced upon him by the Genesis family. The wedding news of Sebastian and Song Wei quickly spread throughout the entire capital city. My grandfather, who was already seriously ill because of my parents passing away, was directly sent into the ICU out of anger. While I was accompanying him day and night in the hospital, my uncle barged into the company with his men. Before, with the Sebastian family around, they were still afraid and didn't dare to act rashly. Now, towards me, an orphan without parents, they naturally had no scruples. During the brief moment when my grandfather was conscious, he grabbed my hand and only said one sentence. "Genesis, the company is the life's work of your parents. Even if it has to be destroyed, it must not be snatched away by those with wolfish ambitions." I couldn't help but cry until my eyes were red. "Don't worry. I already have an idea." My uncle's family was adamant that the girls of the Genesis family couldn't inherit the family business. Using this as an excuse, they wanted to seize everything of the eldest branch of the Genesis family, but I would never let them have their way. In the second week after Sebastian announced his wedding news, I also made the most absurd yet most important decision in my life. I needed a child to inherit the family business of the Genesis family. Because I didn't meet the conditions for in vitro fertilization, I finally chose natural conception. As for the father of the child, the butler who had been with my grandfather all his life placed the finally screened and retained information in front of me. Miss, please have a look. The information was simple. He was from Hong Kong City, took his mother's surname, and should be from a single-parent family. His educational background was also excellent, proving that he had a high IQ and good genes. The extremely detailed physical examination report proved that he was in good health with no hidden diseases, most importantly, that face in the photo. It was so handsome that it was almost dizzying. Uncle Joe, are you sure that such an excellent man also needs to do this kind of business? I couldn't help but feel a bit puzzled. Uncle Joe just smiled affectionately. It seems that someone in his family is seriously ill and in urgent need of quick money. I couldn't help but think of my grandfather who was still in the hospital and felt a pang of sympathy. Add another 500,000 yuan to him. Yes, Mississippi. On the 12th day after Sebastian announced his wedding news, it happened to be my most fertile day. I saw the man named Liam. He was wearing a very ordinary black shirt and long pants. I couldn't tell the brand, probably cheap supermarket goods, but the clothes that cost only 100 or so yuan on him didn't seem cheap either. As stated in the contract, his eyes were covered with a black ribbon. When I pushed the door and entered, he subconsciously stood up and looked towards the door. I then realized that he was very tall, at least 188 centimeters. He also had a great body, with broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and long legs. Miss? Liam tentatively opened his mouth. His voice was also very nice and I couldn't help but feel even more satisfied in my heart. It's me. Don't be nervous. I walked slowly towards him, raised my hand and patted his arm. His muscles were great too. Did you take a bath? I asked. Yes, I did. In fact, I was already so nervous that a thin layer of sweat had broken out on my back, but I deliberately put on an experienced and calm demeanor. Then let's begin. Liam couldn't see me, but I could see him. After I said this sentence, the corners of Liam's mouth curled up slightly. Facing me, through that layer of black cloth, he nodded slightly. Okay, Mississippi. He unbuttoned the buttons of his shirt one by one with his slender fingers. The hem was neatly pulled out from the waistband of his trousers. When I saw his slender and tight waist and the mermaid lines, my face instantly turned red. When he unbuckled his belt, I was so flustered that I directly turned around. The rustling sound of the clothes stopped. The man's voice, sexy and husky, rang out. Miss, it's okay now. Oh, okay? Then go and lie on the bed. I forced myself to turn around, trying to look extremely relaxed and natural. But suddenly, my eyes widened. The long black ribbon hung down from his neat short hair. His eyes and brows were covered by the cloth strip, but it made his nose look even more prominent. At the age of 24, this was probably the first time I had seen the body of the opposite sex so directly and up close. Miss? Perhaps because I hadn't spoken for a while, Liam called out softly. He then took a step forward and stretched out his hand as if looking for someone. His fingertips touched my shoulder. After a brief pause, he somewhat overstepped and gently held my shoulder. And in the next instant, he directly picked me up horizontally. My body sank into the soft bed. Liam's hands were considerately propped on either side of me, not pressing on me. If you feel uncomfortable later, miss, remember to tell me. My heart was beating so fast that I was dizzy and could hardly breathe. Don't be so wordy. Hurry up. I turned my face away and bit my lip tightly, but I didn't know that my ears and the back of my neck were all red. Okay. He lowered his head, the black ribbon hanging down, sliding over my collarbone. When Liam was about to kiss me, I dodged. Don't touch my mouth. I was bluffing, thinking that my voice sounded fierce, but I didn't know that the ending of my voice was trembling in a drawn-out way. If it hurts, bite me. Liam's slightly cool fingers cupped my face and he kissed my neck gently. The moment he pressed closer to me, my cell phone suddenly rang. Liam subconsciously stopped his movements. I sat up straight and reached out to grab my phone. Unexpectedly, I saw the name Sebastian. I was stunned for a moment, but still hung up. But soon, the call came again from the other side. My eyes fell on Liam's face beside me. The man's lips were thin. I heard that people with such lips are born cold-hearted. I was in a daze for a moment. Cold-hearted was good. Cold-hearted was more suitable for this kind of business. We would have no more to do with each other after it was over. I answered the call. Sebastian's voice sounded a bit strange to my ears. Genesis, why didn't you tell me that Grandpa was in the hospital? It's not exactly a secret. Where are you now? I'll pick you up and we'll go to the hospital to see Grandpa together. No need. Genesis, Grandpa was very kind to me. I also want to make the old man feel at ease at this time. I said no need. Thank you for your kindness. Genesis, you should understand the principle of knowing when to stop, right? There was already an uncontrollable anger in Sebastian's voice. I knew him. For someone as arrogant and conceited as he was, it was rare for him to take the initiative to call me to show his kindness. But really, it wasn't needed. After all, it was already too late. I clutched my phone and looked at the man in front of me. I could feel the surging emotions being restrained and suppressed by him. Sebastian. Before I could finish speaking, Liam suddenly said in a husky voice, Miss, can we continue now? A scalding kiss landed on the corner of my mouth again. And he, like a drawn sword, was already ready to go. The phone slipped from my palm to the floor. I frowned and let out a soft groan. Ouch! Sebastian's voice rang out in a chaotic and broken way. Genesis. Who the hell are you with? The screen went dark. I opened my mouth in pain and bit hard on Liam's forearm. He paused for a moment and then bent down again, extremely gentle yet extremely dominant. He kissed my lips. I subconsciously wanted to push him away. But after the gentle kiss, there was a sharp pain as if I was being pierced through. Liam suddenly stopped his movements. The silk ribbon hanging down from his eyebrows fluttered gently on the side of my neck. I was crying from the pain, and my fingertips had already unconsciously dug deeply into the flesh of his arm. The big hand that had been holding my waist somehow loosened at some point. He took me into his arms completely. The wet hair messily sticking to the side of my face was brushed away by his slender fingers. The scorching yet tender kisses fell once again. When I was gradually getting used to it and in a trance, he pressed me under him once more. I had lost consciousness briefly in the middle, so I didn't know. At that moment, Liam pulled off the silk ribbon that had been blindfolding his eyes. I in the bedroom with hazy light and shadow, he looked at my face. He kissed me inch by inch from the space between my eyebrows. When I opened my eyes the next day, I found that I had already been changed into clean and soft pajamas. The other side of the bed was empty. It seemed that everything that had happened last night was just an illusion. With difficulty, I got up, washed up, and when I went downstairs for breakfast, Uncle Joe told me that Liam had left last night as agreed. I sat down at the dining table, thinking of his overstepping and recklessness last night, thinking of how I couldn't help but sink with him in the end. The back of my neck couldn't help but feel a bit hot. Did you give him the money? 1/3 has been paid as agreed. The remaining part will be paid to him all at once after you confirm that you're pregnant. I nodded and didn't say anything more. Intercontinental Hotel. Liam had already changed out of the set of inexpensive clothes he had been wearing. He had just finished swimming in the private swimming pool on the top floor. The butler from the old house was already waiting in the living room. Madam has learned that you've been in Beijing these days and wants you to have dinner together tonight. Liam casually threw the bath towel aside and sneered. She has other intentions, doesn't she? You'll be 28 after the Spring Festival. No wonder Madam is so worried. Liam walked to the refrigerator and casually took out a bottle of water. His wet black hair was casually pulled back, revealing his square forehead and long eyebrows that flew up to his temples. What's the rush? In a few days, maybe she'll be a grandmother. Liam took a sip of water and joked with the butler who had watched him grow up since childhood. The butler was shocked. My young master, you can't play such a big joke. Our Chen and Liang families have only you as the heir. The future young master and young miss will be more precious than gold. How can you be so casual about this? The future young mistress should also be married in a proper and grand way. Of course I know. Liam sat down on the sofa and looked down at the still clear tooth mark on his left arm, thinking of that night. His eyebrows gradually took on a gentle look. Things didn't go as expected. My period was only 1 day late and then came as usual. I came out of the bathroom and sat on the sofa feeling a bit dejected. During this period, the turmoil outside was getting bigger and bigger, and Grandpa had already fallen into a deep coma. The doctor said that he could only hold on for at most 1 month. I called Uncle Joe over. Contact Liam. Let's try again next month. Yes, Mississippi. I stood up and walked a few steps forward but then stopped and looked at Uncle Joe. Tell him the rules carefully again. If I hadn't been reluctant to face a completely strange man again, I probably wouldn't have looked for Liam again. After all, that night, he had overstepped more than once. The day before meeting Liam again, I met Sebastian at a banquet. Surprisingly, he didn't bring his fiancée, Xiao Wei. After seeing him from a distance, I immediately looked away. Today was the birthday of Aunt Song, a family friend. The reason I chose to attend was that I also wanted to reconnect with the old friends of my parents. However, obviously, I was still a bit too naive. I already understood the truth that people's attitudes change when one's status changes. But what I experienced today was even more straightforward. Although Sebastian and I had a secret relationship in the past, there are no secrets that can be kept forever. During those 3 years, it was indeed because of the influence of Sebastian's family that I could have a place to stand, but now that Sebastian has announced his wedding news, I'm just a helpless orphan girl. Who would even look at me seriously? The raised wine glass was awkwardly held there for a long time. Aunt Song just seemed to notice me and clinked glasses with me. But obviously, she didn't have any intention of chatting with me. I naturally wouldn't make a fool of myself. After toasting, I walked to a quiet corner. Being treated so coldly and without any respect, I was in an extremely bad mood. Before I knew it, I had drunk a few more glasses. Sebastian walked over at some point. Genesis. He looked at me as arrogantly as ever. But I was no longer as cautious as before, trying carefully to maintain a relationship with him as if walking on thin ice. Mr. Sebastian. After greeting him coldly, I was about to get up and leave. But Sebastian stopped me. Genesis, I went to see Grandpa a few days ago. His condition isn't good. Yes, the doctor has talked to me about it. Sebastian's voice seemed to be a bit gentler. Genesis, I've also heard about the recent turmoil in the Genesis family. What do you want to say, Mr. Sebastian? I looked at Sebastian calmly and distantly. When I was young, I was really naive and stupid. I thought that since we had known each other since childhood and grew up together as childhood sweethearts, I thought that since the Genesis family had saved his grandfather and him, he would surely treat me well, but I completely ignored that if a man doesn't like you, even kindness can't bind him. And it was a mean thing for our Genesis family to try to get something in return for the kindness we had shown. Actually, Sebastian didn't really owe me anything. After all, feelings can't be forced. Sebastian slowly took a step forward and gently held my hand. Genesis, if you weren't so stubborn, I might have helped you. Help me? Yes, after all, our lives were saved by your Genesis family. Sebastian laughed. I've been waiting for you to give in these days. Genesis, after all, we've had such a long relationship. I wouldn't really leave you to fend for yourself. Sebastian, just say it straight. What exactly do you want? I won't marry you, but we can maintain our previous relationship. I looked at Sebastian a bit surprisingly. After all, that night when he proposed to Xiao Wei, he was so attentive and affectionate that it seemed so sincere. It turned out that it was all just an act on the surface. You already have a fiancé. So what? In our circle, which man or woman doesn't have a close female or male friend? Sebastian looked at me arrogantly and conceitedly. Genesis, you know what choice to make given the current situation of the Genesis family. Being with me will only be beneficial to you, Sebastian. I interrupted him in disgust. Before today, I really didn't hate you at all. On the contrary, I was still reflecting on whether our Genesis family was too mean in trying to force you to repay the kindness. But I don't think so now. Genesis. You're an out-and-out scoundrel. If the people in our Genesis family knew that the person they saved was an ungrateful wretch, a complete scoundrel, they would surely regret having saved you at that time. Genesis, it won't do you any good to just speak out of anger. Think about your parents' hard work. If it's really ruined by you, when they know about it in the afterlife. If my parents knew that I had to be your lover to save the company, they would never forgive me in the afterlife. Genesis, you'd better think it through. You know, I won't give you a third chance. I picked up the wine glass and splashed the wine directly on his face. Get out. Sebastian's face turned livid. Obviously, he was extremely angry. I was even prepared for him to hit me. After all, as a pampered son of heaven like him, he had never suffered such humiliation. Genesis, I'll wait for the day when you regret it and come crying to me for help. After saying that, Sebastian turned around and left. There was a buzz of discussion around. I stood there as if I hadn't heard anything and turned around to walk out. As soon as I got in the car, Uncle Joe called. Miss, I've already picked the person up. I got it. I'll be right back. I hung up the phone and looked at the dark sky outside the car window. If I still couldn't get pregnant smoothly tonight, there really wouldn't be much time left for me. The car stopped downstairs of the villa. The light in my bedroom was already on. I got out of the car and didn't let anyone help me. I staggered upstairs by myself. Liam was sitting quietly on the sofa with his eyes blindfolded as he had been last time. I pushed the door open, leaned against the door, and looked at him with hazy, drunken eyes. Probably because I had drunk a lot of wine tonight. Suddenly my emotions got out of control. Miss? Liam should have heard the sound of me pushing the door open. He turned his face and looked at me through that layer of silk ribbon. I walked over step by step and my gaze also fell on his face and body. The air was filled with a faint cool fragrance after bathing. The clothes on him were obviously not his own. They should have been prepared by Uncle Joe. They were clearly of good quality and suited him well. Liam stood up. He was a full head taller than me. Especially now that I had kicked off my high heels. When standing in front of him, I actually felt that I didn't have enough presence. I slightly tiptoed and reached out to grab the front of his clothes. Liam, who gave you permission to kiss me? Who allowed it? Miss. You still know that I'm the miss, your benefactor? Liam seemed to laugh softly. Yes, Mrs. Wright. I overstepped. Dare you do it again? I wouldn't dare. I patted his face with satisfaction. You're very obedient. I like it. I'm glad Miss likes it. I let go of my hand and took a step back, looking him up and down. Are you impotent? Otherwise, why haven't I gotten pregnant? I saw that Liam was clearly stunned for a moment. I'll give you one last chance. If I still can't get pregnant this time, Liam. I patted his handsome face again. I'll replace you, miss. If there were regret pills in the world, I would never have let myself blurt out such wild words that night. Especially when I said something to a man that questioned his ability. And the consequence of doing so was that, throughout that whole night, Liam almost drove me crazy with his actions. Not only did he kiss me countless times, but he even forced me to take the initiative to kiss him. If I hadn't begged him pitifully with tears in the end, he probably wouldn't have let me off. But this night of tossing and turning clearly had remarkable results. Grandpa was declared in critical condition again. When those people from the collateral branches of the Genesis family blocked me in the company and forced me to hand over the seal, I directly contacted the media and held a press conference. At the press conference, I publicly announced my pregnancy test report. And declared that the child would take my surname Sue when born and inherit the business left by my parents. After briefly answering the reporter's questions, I received a call from Sebastian. He was obviously extremely angry on the phone and his voice was a bit hoarse. Genesis, I have never touched you. Where did the child in your belly come from? Is it a scam you deliberately created, isn't it? I could understand Sebastian's anger. After all, counting from the beginning, I had been pregnant for 5 weeks by now and it had only been 3 months since I broke up with him. Of course you haven't touched me, and I also didn't say that the father of the child is you. I walked into the elevator and looked at myself in the elevator mirror. Sebastian, we have already broken up. Our respective matters have nothing to do with each other anymore. Please don't call me again in the future. Genesis, are you really pregnant? Who is the father of the child? Make it fucking clear. I didn't answer. After hanging up the phone, I directly deleted his number. From now on, this would be my biggest secret. That man named Liam had already taken the money I gave him and returned to Hong Kong City. We would never meet again in this lifetime. In May of the second year, I gave birth to my eldest son, Su Qingshuan, in Beijing. Contrary to what I expected, he didn't look much like me. Uncle Zhou said that Qingshuan's eyes, eyebrows, and jaw were exactly like Liam's. I looked at him and often felt dazed. At the beginning, I asked Liam to cover his eyes to prevent him from knowing what I looked like and my identity, but Uncle Zhou had seen him. Since he said so, it must be true. So, Liam's eyes and eyebrows were like this. Actually, even with his eyes covered, it could be vaguely seen that he was extremely handsome, and a man like him, once out of difficulties, would surely have a bright future. For such a shady past, he surely wanted to forget it more than I did. So, I didn't need to worry that he would suddenly pop up and try to take the child from me, nor did I need to worry about seeing him again. So, Liam's eyes and eyebrows were like this. Actually, even with his eyes covered, it could be vaguely seen that he was extremely handsome, and a man like him, once out of difficulties. At Qingshuan's full moon ceremony, the most low-key and mysterious Liam family in Beijing sent precious gifts. I was a bit surprised. Not to mention the Genesis family, which was far from what it used to be nowadays. Even the still powerful Sebastian family couldn't compare with them. The Genesis family had never had any interaction with the Liam family and couldn't even hope to attach themselves to them. Why would the Liam family send such precious gifts? What surprised me even more was that when Qingshuan was 100 days old, Liam's mother actually came to visit me in person, and invited me to get together 3 days later. I was very nervous in my heart but also full of doubts. It's just that Liam's mother was a very gentle and kind elder. She didn't seem to have any ill will towards me at all. Especially towards Qingshuan, she liked him very much. During this visit, besides giving me gifts, she also specially prepared a rich 100-day gift for Qingshuan. When she was leaving, Liam's mother couldn't bear to part with Qingshuan, holding him in her arms and looking back several times reluctantly. This made me even more suspicious. So when I went to the appointment 3 days later, I specially asked Uncle Zhou to stay at home to take care of Qingshuan. Then I took my assistant and driver and went to the private club owned by Liam's mother. As soon as my car stopped, several people greeted me eagerly. "Miss Genesis, please come in quickly. Our madam has been waiting for you for a long time." "Yes, madam has already instructed us to wait for your car outside." "Thank you." I thanked them with a smile and followed them towards the flower hall. Unexpectedly, I saw a dark gray Bentley slowly stopping not far away. The driver ran to open the door. A very tall man got out of the car. Through a row of flower trees, I could only vaguely see a side view. My heart skipped a beat for no reason. Even my steps stopped. I had never seen Liam in broad daylight or under bright light. But when I saw this figure at first sight, I felt strangely familiar. But then, I couldn't help but deny myself in my heart. Liam was from Hong Kong City. His mother was also from Hong Kong City. It was precisely because he wasn't from Beijing and was far away in Hong Kong that Uncle Zhou had chosen him at the beginning. He wouldn't suddenly appear in Beijing. But Beijing isn't surnamed Su, and I don't have the ability to prevent Liam from setting foot here for a lifetime. It wouldn't be strange if he came to Beijing. But, could it be him? "Miss Genesis?" The person beside me called me softly. I came to my senses and quickly caught up with their steps. "Does Liam's mother have other guests today?" The person in front of me greeted me warmly. "It's our young master who has just returned to Beijing." As he spoke, he casually pointed at the Bentley. "That's the young master's car." So the man just now was the only son of Liam's mother. Liam's mother was also from Hong Kong and married into the Liam family in Beijing. Her only son naturally had the surname Chen. So it wasn't Liam. I breathed a sigh of relief. But for some reason, I also felt a bit of indescribable loss. But this sense of loss made me feel funny about myself. Why should I feel lost? Could it be that in my heart, I was still hoping to meet Liam? What was between us was just a transaction. After the transaction ended, it should be completely cut off cleanly. I was thinking like this, but my mind was still a bit dazed, when I entered the flower hall and heard a few laughter and conversations inside. The one talking with Liam's mother was probably her only son. I subconsciously looked up. And I happened to meet the eyes of that man. Those were a pair of eyes and eyebrows that I had never seen before. But it seemed as if I had seen them countless times. My heart stopped beating for an instant. Even my thoughts seemed to freeze. Miss Genesis is here. Liam's mother got up with a smile and walked over, took my hand and pulled me to sit down. Then she ordered the servants to serve tea. Liam, this is Miss Genesis. Liam's mother looked at her only son and then at me, with an even bigger smile. Miss Genesis, he is my useless son. Miss Genesis, I've heard a lot about you. Liam walked up to me and extended his hand to me. My heart started beating again and gradually became more intense. My mind was still blank, but a buzzing sound gradually rang in my ears. I didn't respond politely, nor did I extend my hand to shake his. Even a bit rudely, I looked at Liam's mother. Liam's mother, what did you just call him? Liam's mother was a bit surprised, but still smiled and said, it's his name, Liam, Liam. I murmured and repeated in a daze, Liam? I looked at the man in front of me. His height was almost the same as Liam's. If I covered his eyes and eyebrows and only showed his nose and lips, my body suddenly swayed slightly. Miss Genesis. Liam quickly reached out to support me, but I pushed him away. I raised my hand and gently covered his eyes. Exactly the same. Exactly the same. I remembered the first night I had with him. At that time, I even thought that Liam's lips were a bit thin. It was said that men with such lips were cold-hearted. But for me, being cold-hearted was good. Being cold-hearted was more suitable for this transaction. But if Liam was Liam, why did he deceive me like this? Obviously, he was a noble young master born with a silver spoon in his mouth, but he pretended to be a poor student. Even had such a ridiculous transaction with me. Okay, even if it was for fun, thinking it was exciting. After the transaction ended, it should be completely over. Why did he suddenly appear in front of me? Suddenly get involved in my life with the child? By this time, I seemed to understand why the Liam family would send gifts for the full moon ceremony, why Liam's mother would visit in person when Qingshuan was 100 days old, and why she would love Qingshuan so much, because they all knew that Qingshuan was Liam's child. They wanted to take my child away. When my hand dropped from Liam's eyes and eyebrows, tears suddenly burst out. Liam was obviously flustered. Genesis. He subconsciously wanted to raise his hand to wipe my tears, but I pushed his hand away. Sorry, I'm not feeling well. I want to go back. Miss Genesis, you look really pale. Let Liam send you back. I raised my hand to wipe away the tears. Looking at the Liam in front of me, I couldn't help but laugh. I didn't stay any longer. I picked up my bag, turned around and walked straight out. Both Liam's mother and Liam chased after me, but I didn't want to stop for a single step. All of this happened so suddenly that I couldn't accept it. I felt like a clown who had been kept in the dark. Genesis, could you listen to me for a few words? Liam grasped my wrist. Without thinking, I shook it off. If I remember correctly, it was clearly written in the contract at that time. After the deal was over, there shouldn't be any more connections between you and me. You took the money, so you should abide by the agreement. The relationship between us had already ended completely last year. I don't care what you suddenly appear in front of me for now. I took a deep breath and gradually calmed down. Anyway, I have only one thing to say. The child is mine. His surname is Su. He has nothing to do with you. Nobody is allowed to take him away from me. Genesis, I've never thought of taking the child away. Okay, since that's the case, then I'm being too suspicious. Just forget what I said. I want to go home now. Is that okay? Perhaps because I was in such a bad state, Liam didn't stop me again. Liam's mother called me several times later, but I didn't answer any of them. Liam also came to visit the Genesis family. I didn't see him. Qingshuan grew up day by day. Just as Uncle Zhou had said, his eyebrows and eyes were exactly the same as Liam's, and I also learned some things about Liam from Uncle Zhou. He was the only son of his parents. He was the only heir on both his mother's side and his father's side that he had two identities. In Hong Kong, he was young Master Liam of the Liang family. In Beijing, he was young Master Liam of the Liam family. Actually, it wasn't really deception at the beginning. Liam was indeed his real name, but whenever I thought of those pitifully few past events, I would feel embarrassed. The only heir of the Liang and Chen families. Back then, I even felt sorry for him and wanted to give him an extra 500,000 yuan as compensation. When Liam got the money at that time, was he laughing at me for being stupid? Sometimes I really couldn't figure it out. For a man like him, couldn't he get any woman he wanted or do whatever exciting things he liked? Why did he have to play tricks on me like this? He said that he didn't have the idea of taking the child away. But I wasn't stupid enough to believe it. The Liang and Chen families had few members. Even if Liam didn't care, the elders of the two families might not think the same way. What if they really wanted to fight with me for the child? I didn't dare to imagine the consequence at all, because the consequence was self-evident. It would be like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Although I refused to meet anyone from the Liam family, Liam still quietly infiltrated my life. The Liam family really didn't show any intention of fighting with me for Qingshuan. On the contrary, the gifts they sent to me and Qingshuan almost never stopped. Even if I refused to accept them and turned them away outside the door, they were still persistent. Sometimes even Uncle Zhou advised me. For a family like the Liam family to be willing to humble themselves like this was really not easy. When he said that, Liam was waiting downstairs. September in the capital city was still unbearably hot. It was nearly noon and the sun was scorching. Liam's forehead was sweaty and wet. He had his suit folded over his arm and the back of his shirt was already soaked in a large area. Miss, I always feel that the Liam family doesn't have those dirty thoughts, and this Mr. Liam, he doesn't seem like a bad person either. Uncle Zhou looked downstairs seeming a bit reluctant. You've seen it with your own eyes in the past month or so, Miss. To be honest, with Mr. Liam's background, if he really wanted to do something, why would he go to so much trouble? I couldn't help but look downstairs too. Liam had been standing there for nearly 2 hours. The heat was still intense. If something really happened to him. Thinking of Qingshuan and his eyebrows and eyes that were exactly the same as Liam's, I finally softened my heart. Please ask him to come in and tell the kitchen to prepare some herbal tea to relieve the summer heat. I said softly, my eyes falling on Liam's handsome and noble face. After a while, I just moved my gaze away. I'll go down and have a good talk with him later. Uncle Zhou happily went downstairs. I sat upstairs for a while. I changed into another dress and went downstairs. Liam was sitting in the living room drinking tea. Seeing me coming downstairs, he put down the teacup and stood up. Miss Genesis. I asked the servants to leave and got straight to the point. Mr. Liam, let's have a good talk today. What exactly do you and your mother want to do by doing these things these days? Liam looked at me and didn't speak for a long time. I could hear the ticking sound of the wall clock. The birds in the cages under the eaves outside the house chirped lazily from time to time. Even farther away, it seemed that Qingshuan was crying for a while and then stopped. Everything was quiet, the air conditioner was on in the house. But I was extremely irritable and my mind was in a mess. Just when I couldn't bear it and was about to tell him to leave again, Liam suddenly said, Miss Genesis, I want to marry you as my wife, in a proper way with a grand wedding. I was shocked. The teacup in my hand almost fell to the ground. But Liam continued, Miss Genesis, actually, this idea wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing, nor was it a decision made after careful consideration and weighing the pros and cons. Then what was it? Liam smiled faintly. Genesis, I don't know if you still remember that 20 years ago, you and Grandpa Genesis saved several people at sea. Of course I remembered. I was just a few years old at that time. I was very young. Later, Grandpa often told me about it, so I remembered it until now. And Sebastian and his grandpa were the ones who were rescued by our family's private yacht at that time. I was also among the rescued people. But Grandpa never mentioned you, because it was my cousin who took me out to sea to play at that time. He was afraid that his family would find out about this and hold him accountable, so he concealed my identity. I was only 8 years old at that time. I was so frightened at sea that I almost lost half of my life. In the end, all I remembered was that there was a character, Sue, engraved on that yacht. When Liam said this, his voice suddenly became gentle. And there was a very small and lovely little girl who gave me a cup of hot water. Genesis, I've never changed this idea over the years. I want to find that person back then and marry her. Long after Liam left, my mind was still in chaos. I called Uncle Joe to the study. Uncle Joe, how did you find Liam at the beginning? Miss, actually it was Liam who took the initiative to approach me at the beginning. Uncle Joe didn't dare to look at me. At that time, I had already picked out 2 people for you and was about to send you the information. But Liam's information and resume were so clean and excellent that I was privately inclined towards him, so I let him jump the queue. I didn't expect that you would also choose him. I was both angry and amused in my heart. He was really confident. Didn't he think about what would happen if I hadn't chosen him? Only then did I remember that I had actually seen his photo at that time. There was his ID photo on the information sent by Uncle Joe. I was really attracted by his face at first sight. Uncle Joe, what do you think I should do now? Miss, you're not even 25 years old this year. Before, when you said that you wouldn't get married again, I actually didn't agree in my heart. You're still so young. You have so much youth waiting for you to enjoy. If Mr. Liam is sincere, you might as well give it a try with him. Besides, the Liam family doesn't have the intention of taking the child away. I can see that they are quite sincere. Uncle Joe sighed lovingly. I know that you were hurt by the Sebastian family and that bastard Sebastian, but there are still good men in the world, right? But he lied to me. Why didn't he just come to me directly and say that he wanted to repay us? He had many ways to repay the kindness. Why did he have to do it like this? Uncle Joe couldn't help laughing. It's because you were too impatient, Mississippi. If Mr. Liam hadn't intervened at that time, you might have chosen someone else and gone ahead with it. This was also a stopgap measure. Mr. Liam was afraid that he would be one step too slow and regret it for the rest of his life. Moreover, I dislike him. Why should I give it a try with him? I grabbed a throw pillow and covered my face tightly. But I'm just angry. Even if I want to fall in love, it doesn't necessarily have to be with him. There are so many good-looking and excellent men in Beijing. Uncle Joe couldn't help but chuckle. All right. Miss can fall in love with whoever she wants. But even though he said that, Uncle Joe still tipped Liam off once. As soon as there was any sign of movement on my side, Liam knew about it immediately. Even when I had just sat down with my date in the afternoon tea restaurant, Liam's Bentley was already parked by the street, although neither of us was married. But for some reason, the moment his car stopped, I felt as guilty as if I had been caught red-handed. Liam didn't disturb me. He didn't even get out of the car. But I was so restless that I could only force myself to make an excuse to send the man opposite me away first. When it was getting dark, I picked up my bag and got up to walk outside. Liam also got out of the car. As the streetlights lit up one by one in the dusk, he was bathed in the colorful glow. I deliberately pretended not to see him. I walked straight along the street. I didn't look back even when I reached the crossroads. But I just knew that he must be following behind me. When the green light came on and I was about to cross the zebra crossing, Liam gently grasped my wrist from behind. Some cyclist sped past me. Liam pulled me in front of him. Beijing had entered winter. He was wearing a navy blue light windbreaker, and he wrapped me completely inside it.